Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi, Doktor. Good morning.
Selamat pagi.
So nice to see everyone again. Well, I don't really see you, but nice to be with you again. I hope you guys enjoyed your week break, your semester break. Of course, the class always after the semester break is a bit hard to get into, especially when you're online, but inshallah, we do our best, yeah? Okay, so just waiting for everyone else to come online. Let's get going here. Okay, so today we are going to continue our discussion on youth development by looking at, so the first, let me put it this way, the first half of the class is more on the sort of foundations and the theories related to youth development. So now the second half of the class, inshallah, we will start to move more into the applications of those theories into different, the different ways that youth development is practiced in society. Okay, so so today we're going to start with a topic on positive youth development. Okay, so this is of course related to the discussion in the lecture we had on the theories. We talked about the sort of foundational positive developmental theories. So that was theory, right? So that those theories sort of form the foundation of what the practice of PYD is all about. Okay, so when we actually begin to work with youth in programs, in communities, in after school or co-curricular programs, stuff like that, how do we actually put it into practice? Yeah, so that's really what we're going to talk about today, inshallah. Okay, so we will begin our discussion. So let me first let's look at our Puja Blast. A couple of housekeeping issues. Okay, so as you know, the McFarland assignment, I postponed it a week because of the break, but it's due today. So by tonight, I think midnight is the deadline. You know, some of you asked me yesterday. Okay, so you have until midnight to submit it to Puja Blast. Okay, so please do that. Are there any questions or problems with that? Any problems with uploading or anything? No, everything okay? Okay, so and then also we got the our date and time for our final exam. So I've posted it here on Puja Blast. Okay, so it's going to be on the 23rd of February at 11:30. Okay, so I'm assuming it's going to be online. That's at least what we know as of right now. If that changes, of course, I will let you know. But as far as we know right now, it's going to be online. So it'll be 2 hours, scheduled for 2 hours. Okay, so please make a note on your calendars, yeah, for that. Okay, I don't think there's anything else. Tomorrow's class, since it's already week 8 and we're already into the second half, I will begin to be spending most of our Thursday 1 hour classes on helping you with aspects of your the group project. Yeah, so like tomorrow I think I'm going to do a session on how to do good interviews, because one of the things I've asked you to do is I've asked you to collect some data, right, for your program proposals, and that's going to mean doing probably some online interviews with people that are involved in these different programs that you're going to be writing about. So I'm going to do a session tomorrow, I think, on how to do good interviews. Okay, so what are the things that you want to keep in mind? So each week I'll probably try to hit on another aspect of the assignment, unless there's something else that I decide to do. But I really want to focus on helping you to, because this is also related to research methods. Okay, so research methods. So give you a better idea of how to do these types of activities in the context of doing research like this assignment. Okay, so I think it'll help you with the assignment. And I've also, as you know, I've also posted examples. I believe it was let me see here, Thursday's class. no, not this one. Week 6, maybe. I think I posted it. Week 6, where's week 6? Yeah, so if you look at week 6, the Thursday class, I've just to remind you, I posted 2 example group projects. Okay, so you can sort of get an idea, use those as a guide, right? And those are quite good projects. They did very well on those assignments. So you can kind of see what is expected of those. Okay, so you can use those as a guide. And then of course you'll be doing your presentations in week 13 and 14 for the class. All right, so I'll also talk a bit more about that in the coming weeks, inshallah. Okay, any questions about that, the assignment or anything? So for for later in the class, I'm going to ask you to download this file here. As you can see that I'm pointing at on Putra Blast. It's called the Search Institute's 40 Assets list, okay? Because we're going to do a little activity in a little while using that list of assets. These are called developmental assets, and I'll be discussing them in a little while, but we're going to be using that as an exercise. So if you could try and go to your Putra Blast and click on this link, and you should be able to download this list, okay? It's just a one-page download, one-page file, okay? So if you could, please go ahead and download that now so that we can use it later in the class. All right, and then the slides are also here for today. All right, so no questions, everyone's good? You all awake? Too early? Well, you're very quiet today. Okay, never mind. If I don't hear any objections, I'll continue. Okay, so again, reminder to everyone, based on what we sort of, based on the first exam, it's really helpful. It's really, I think, helpful for your learning. Make sure you ask lots of questions. Whatever is not clear, please ask. Okay, I know that people tend to be a bit hesitant on online classes to ask questions, but please don't be. All right, please ask your questions. It's going to help you a lot when you go for your. It's going to help you at first to understand the material that we're covering, and then also to help you on the exams. Okay, and I think in the first half of the class, there's probably not enough of that, and that's probably why you're somewhat confused, I think, come exam time. Okay, so really, please feel free, and there's really no bad questions in this class. I mean, I have to really emphasize that. Okay. All right, well, that said, let's start. So this is positive youth development, okay? And positive youth development is what we refer to as the foundation for unleashing young people's potential, okay? So based on those learning theories that we discussed earlier in the class, those learning theories form a foundation for an application, a way of working with young people called positive youth development. And this approach to working with young people is aimed at really unleashing young people's full potential, okay? Unleashing their full potential. And this is also referred to as thriving, okay? Thriving. You'll see that in the literature quite a bit, okay? This notion of thriving, okay? We want young people not only to be not in trouble, to be not having difficulties with, things like drug use or alcohol abuse or getting in trouble with the law, crime and all that. Those are things, of course, we want young people to avoid, but that's not enough. We shouldn't want to settle just for that. We should want our young people to thrive and to really do their best, achieve what they can, and unleash their potential. And that's really what PYD, all right, PYD, youth development, is all about, all right? So you'll see that referred to a lot as we go along, this idea of thriving. So how did we get to this point? All right. Well, as I showed you earlier in the semester, often this is the way that young people are portrayed in the media. Okay. So again, this is from a Western or American perspective. Okay. So we see a lot of this in Western countries, this idea that youth are troublemakers, they're criminals, they're causing all kinds of problems, they're not very intelligent. Okay, so you can see here, all right, we have enough youth. How about a fountain of smart? Okay, this idea that young people they can't think clearly, they can't think in an intelligent way, right? They're involved in all this out of control behavior, okay, et cetera, et cetera. So this is often the way young people are portrayed. And so, as a result, okay, it affects and leads us to move this window away from share application. What does that mean? Sorry. It leads to us studying young people. Okay, so when researchers go to study young people, they often study young people's negative behaviors, problems. Okay, so we often study young people and we study their problems. Okay, so for example, here, youth smoking. All right. All right. So we want to look. Research then will look at to what extent are young people involved in things like smoking. Okay. Here's another one. Depression. Okay. What extent are young people facing or experiencing depression? And so, like now, during COVID-19, for example, this is a very big topic. All right, the mental health of young people who are really suffering because of the all the restrictions, the social restrictions, and so forth. Okay, but again, this is also related to a certain way of thinking about youth. Right, we think of them as problems, therefore we study them as problems. Right, and then we report those problems. Okay, and it creates this idea, this sort of collective psychology that young people are problems and they need to be dealt with as problems. Okay, so here's an example. This was in a newspaper in the U.S. It goes back a while. It's quite old, but it still depicts the kind of same thinking that we're talking about. So it says here, recently the Berkeley Media Studies Group studied 3 California newspapers over the course of a year. They found that education and violence, okay, so education and violence dominate the coverage, and each receives about 1/4 of the news attention according to youth. Think about that. Only 3 people in 100, 3% only, okay, 3% perpetrate or become victims of serious violence in a given year, but we show violence as a factor in kids' lives as often as school, okay, 25%. So even though youth involvement in crime is only 3%, it takes up 25% of the media coverage, right? So that's not really commensurate. It's not on par. It's not parallel with the reality, okay? So the media is portraying one thing. The reality is actually quite different, right? And so this is pretty common throughout the world, even though it is definitely worse in Western countries and particularly the US. The US is particularly bad in this respect, okay? So Malaysia, okay, if you look at, this is just a result, as you can see on the screen. I just Googled Malaysian youth, all right, and I looked at images, and this is what came up, right? These are actually very positive pictures of youth, right? So you see all the, all the youth program involvement, these are all, yeah, most of these are youth programs, right? Showing very patriotic youth, okay? Young people involved in different types of civic activities, right? Very, patriotic, waving their flags, So it's not the same in every country. We cannot assume that these things are, they are universal per se. We have to really look at each country a bit differently and understand that the local culture has a lot to do with it, all right? So I think Malaysia, after having spent so much time in both countries, I would say that Malaysia generally looks at its youth and thinks about its youth in a much more positive way than the US. Okay? But it's still the case where if you, for example, if we were to do a content analysis of newspapers in Malaysia or the media, we would probably find somewhat similar patterns than what we saw just now. I think we would see a lot of articles portraying negative aspects of young people's lives, right? And so I think that's true regardless. So the issue here is how we view and portray young people affects how we serve them. Okay, so first how we perceive them, okay, then how we study them and how we report about their lives, like I just showed. That is definitely going to affect how we serve them. So if all the research that's being done is being done on all these negative behaviors and outcomes, that gets reported. Therefore, policymakers are going to say, hey, wait, we have to do something about this, right? So we need to address all these problematic behaviors, and that's going to affect how we come up with programs. All right, so most of the programs that we're going to come up with are going to end up as a result looking at trying to prevent or stop these different types of negative behaviors. So how do we get young people to, stop, how do we stop this thing like snatch thief, all these snatch thieves? How do we stop this problem? How do we address young people's depression, mental health issues? How do we, deal with young people that are misbehaving in school, right? So I'll focus on all these negative kinds of activities and behaviors, all right? So that's how it's going to affect. Now, there is another approach, however, there is another approach, okay? And this is what's considered to be the positive perspective about youth, the positive approach to understanding and working with youth. Okay, so after a while, if we go back to like the 1980s and 1990s, scientists and educators began to realize that this approach to addressing young people's problems only was not really effective. Okay, it wasn't really effective. It wasn't really helping young people to improve their lives. And scientists, practitioners, and educators all sort of agreed that no, we have to start from the assumption, the belief that youth are resources to be developed. They are not problems to be managed. All right. And so those are the two sort of completely different ways of looking at youth. Are they problems that need to be managed, or are they resources that need to be developed? Okay, and that's how we sort of ended up with PYD. So this vision replaced the traditional deficit model. Okay, so remember we talked earlier in the class about the deficit model, which is those deficit theories, those negative ways of looking at youth. All right, so it's those negative ways of looking at youth that we wanted to think about differently. Oh, that's an awful circle. Sorry. It's kind of hard to draw with this thing. Let me see if I can just do lines, okay? All right, so deficit model, which is a model of disease and prevention. Okay, so what does that mean? Who can tell me? I gotta wake you guys up. What does that mean? What does a disease and prevention model mean? Anyone wanna take a guess? When we talk about deficit model being a model of disease and prevention, how do you relate youth development to disease and prevention? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, I see. So Nabila said, thinking about youth as a disease because they bring negative influence. Okay, now in terms of treatment, Nabila, what does that mean in terms of dealing with those negative influences? How do doctors treat diseases usually? They're using an analogy here. The analogy is the medical model or the disease prevention model, which is what? How do doctors usually treat illnesses? How do we treat COVID-19? Come on, somebody. Are you guys there? I don't think I've heard a single voice today.
Yes.
Through finding symptom,
Sorry?
through searching for the symptom.
Okay, searching for the symptom, and then what do they do with the symptoms? What happens when you go to the doctor? You go to the clinic, what do they do?
Prescribe you with the
Give the
cure,
medicine.
the medicine.
Exactly, they treat the symptoms, like you said. Was it Amir, or I don't know who said that, but yeah, they treat the symptoms, right? They treat the symptoms. Take this ubat. They don't look at the root causes of the problems usually. So the disease, the typical traditional medical disease and prevention model is to treat the symptoms, right? So same goes for the deficit model of working with youth. They treat just the symptoms. So a young person who's involved in snatch theft, for example, what do? They treat the symptom, meaning that they dunk up and they throw them in jail, or they press charges or whatever, right? And then they try to rehabilitate them to get them to stop performing that crime, right? To stop doing snatch thieves. But rarely do they look at the root cause of why that young person is involved in snatch theft to begin with. What might be some of the reasons why young people are involved in doing snatch theft? Think about needs, okay? Why might a young person be involved in doing snatch theft? What do you think?
Because they need money.
That could be one reason. They just need money, right? And maybe they are being influenced, by a group of other young people who have, who are, engaged in these kind of negative ways of getting money, right? Obviously, there's other ways of getting money. There's legal halal ways of getting money. These young people choose to do it illegally, right? And by using violence. Okay, so maybe they're being influenced by other youth, right? But at the basic need might be just, resources. Okay, they need money. What is another potential basic need that is fulfilling, right? In relation to the other young people that they're doing it with, another basic need might be what? What other need do you think that might be addressing in addition to just getting the need for money? Think about social need. A lot of young people have the need to what? Siapa tahu? Come on, take a guess. What other need might they be meeting? No one? No one has any idea.
They want to be freely,
They want to what? Sorry?
to be freely, not very conquered by the parent.
Okay, so yeah, so they want to be, they want to be in control of their own, sort of lives. They want to have a sense of we call it agency, actually, where they can make decisions, they can do things on their own. Yeah. So a sense of independence and, that sort of thing. So yeah, that could be one factor. Yes, Nabila, thank you. I don't know why you want to send that to me directly. You can send it to the whole group because it's a good answer. Sense of belonging, right? So oftentimes, like gangs, right? They require their members to do things like this, right? To snatch thief, or to even to hurt people, to do violent kinds of actions or behaviors to 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 um, to fit into the gang, right? Or to be official members of the gang. They have to commit these kind of crimes. So there's a sense of belonging there as well. That could be one of the reasons. All right. So there are actually potentially several different underlying needs related to this type of behavior. All right. And this is, so the medical model that looks at treating the symptom of just the theft, the snatch theft, might not be addressing the underlying root cause, which is the need. Whatever that need is, it may be a combination of needs. It's not addressing the root problem. Just like when you go to the doctor and they give you ubat, they treat the symptoms. They don't really treat the underlying cause of the disease. So for example, you go to the doctor and you are diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, okay? And of course, what they're going to do is they're going to give you ubat. They're going to give you medicine to regulate your, insulin and your blood sugar and all that. But what is the root cause of diabetes especially in type 2 diabetes? What is the root cause? Who can tell me? You guys should know this because diabetes is one of the biggest health crises in the world right now, especially in Malaysia. What is the root cause of type 2 diabetes?
Their diet.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Diet and lifestyle. Right? So the doctors, in the old days, zaman dulu, doctors memang they would tell you, you should change, what you eat, stop eating so much sugar, stop eating all this processed food, right? Nowadays, they just give you ubat. Okay, so this is the medical model. This is the deficit, the disease and prevention model of treating symptoms, really, not really treating the underlying cause of the disease. So the PYD approach tries to look at the underlying cause of why young people get involved in these kind of behaviors to begin with, right? So for example, if we provide young people who might be at risk to join gangs, for example, maybe they come from B40, they come from like these B40 communities. The parents, maybe there's problems in the family. They're sort of neglected. They don't have good relationships with adults. They don't do well in school, and they don't have a very strong sense of belonging. This is where gangs come in and they fill that void for sense of belonging, right? So instead, a PYD approach would say, well, let's get that young person involved in a youth organization or youth association, and give them a positive sense of belonging so they don't need to join the gang and they don't need to be involved in those, sort of criminal types of behaviors, okay? So PYD approach tries to address the root cause, which is the need of the young person, rather than waiting for the young person to get involved in those kind of negative behaviors, all right? Is that clear? Faham? Any questions? Silence. Okay, so I'll assume silence means everything's clear. If not, please feel free to ask me. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, oops, sorry, I missed one. So in the deficit view, people see youth as broken, right? Or destined to be broken, right? And feel that they need to fix them or prevent these problems from occurring. Okay, so like when I asked you guys on the exam, the first exam, about the Tafiz student episode where those kids burned down the Tafiz school, right? Of course, when we see a story like that, the first thing we think of is, my God, these young people are monsters. These are shaitan that would do such a thing, right? They burn down the school, they lock the kids inside. Of course, that may be true to some degree, but it's also a fact that these are youth. And most likely they are reacting to something. They're reacting to something that happened in their lives. And it came out later that there was some hostility between those kids and the Tafiz students. There was some conflict that had gone on before that episode, right? And so there probably should have been some kind of intervention to help those kids deal with their conflict before it got out of control, right? so maybe some kind of mediation between the two groups of young people or whatever would have prevented that from happening. Okay, so before it got to the point where the kids decided to burn down the school, there could have been a more positive intervention to help the young people overcome their differences, whatever those differences were. All right. But anyway, so of course the reaction is, oh, these young people are broken. They're just, they need to be fixed, right? So they need to go for juvenile detention or prison, or who knows, maybe even the death penalty, depending on how the government chooses to prosecute the case. Okay, but definitely these are broken young people. They're broken. Okay, so they need to be fixed. Okay, so that's the deficit kind of view. So PYD is a bit different. We look at the basic needs of youth, how to provide those needs, address those needs before those needs are met in negative ways. Okay. So prevention, okay, and what is prevention? What is prevention? So these are important English words we should know. Prevention is not promotion. Okay. Prevention is not promotion. Problem free is is not fully prepared. Prepared is not engaged. Okay, so what does all this mean? Well, prevention is what? What does the word prevention mean? Who can tell me?
To stop something from happening.
Right, before it happens, yeah, exactly. Stop something from happening before it happens. So in order to stop people from getting diabetes, we need to educate them about eating healthy, okay? Now, prevention is important, of course, but it's not necessarily promoting. In other words, preventing people from getting diabetes is not the same as people actually eating healthy and exercising regularly and having healthy lifestyle. Okay, in other words, prevention is stopping a negative outcome from happening, but it's not necessarily promoting positive outcomes, promoting healthy outcomes. In other words, it's not thriving. It's just stopping the negative, right? But it's not really thriving. You're not promoting young people to be successful. You're just stopping them from getting involved in crime. Okay, so it's not quite the same. It's important, but it's not as good as promotion. We want to promote positive behavior. We want to promote thriving. We want to promote young people being successful. We want to promote them being successful, not just prevent them from going to prison, for example. Okay. So being problem-free, meaning not, problem-free, not being involved in these negative behaviors, is not the same as young people being fully prepared to be adults. Okay. Being fully equipped, having the right skills and the right competencies to be successful in life. Problem-free is not enough. Okay, but it used to be. The deficit approach just looks at avoiding problems. Okay, avoiding problems. All right, but it's not really the same as being fully prepared. And being fully prepared or being prepared is not the same as being engaged. Okay, so ultimately we want young people to be prepared and engaged. We want them to be involved in community, involved in society in healthy ways. All right. Giving back, having, being good citizens, right? Being patriotic, all these things. We want them to be fully engaged citizens, right? And that's what PYD tries to promote, right? It's not going to look at just stopping young people from being involved in problems. It's going to promote them thriving and being fully engaged citizens, right? And so that's the difference between deficit and prevention approach as opposed to PYD approach, right? PYD is down here, being prepared and engaged. Okay, even being prepared is not enough. We want them to be prepared and engaged, right? So they're giving back and they're fully involved in society, right? Okay, so I have to erase my lines. Okay, so the positive youth development perspective, as I've sort of hinted at so far, based on the idea that all young people have strengths, okay? Everyone is born with God-given strength. Okay. And it's our job to find out what those strengths are and to promote those strengths. Right now, strengths here can be anything that can be considered to be something positive. So you may be strong in, working with your hands, like, being a mechanic or a skill, a trade, right? Your strength may be intellectual. Your strength may be music. Your strength may be writing. Your strength may be helping other people. There's so many different ways of looking at young people's strengths. So PYD is aimed at bringing out those strengths and developing those strengths that young people already have. Okay, but to do that, young people have to learn to be in touch with their strengths. How do we know what our strengths are, right? And that's the whole idea behind youth programs, right? And youth associations and so forth. It gives young people the opportunity to explore their strengths and then actually to develop those strengths. Okay, another assumption of the PYD perspective is all families, schools, and communities have assets, right? Another asset is another way of talking about strengths, right? So assets, we usually talk about assets in terms of what, right? When you hear the word asset, usually it refers to what? When you hear the word asset in English, usually it means what? Refers to what? Anyone? What does asset usually mean? People talk about
Valuable.
assets. Sorry?
Valuable.
Okay, so things that are valuable, yeah. So usually things that have value, but usually it's things like property, houses, cars, right? It's physical things. So these are physical assets. Money, okay, obviously money is an asset, okay. Here we're looking at it a little differently. What we're saying is that families, schools, and communities also have assets, but not necessarily physical assets, okay? They also have social assets, like social capital, for example, right? They have psychological assets. They have human resource assets, okay? And these are essentially the nutrients or the building blocks of healthy, positive development. So for example, all communities have social capital. Those social networks that people have, relationships that they have, that act as important assets to having a safe community, doing business in the community, protecting one another, right? Doing gotong royong, watching each other's houses, stuff like that. So these are all assets. Families have assets. Even the love between family members is an asset, right? The healthy relationships that children have with their parents is an asset. Okay, these are all important assets. And so we can look at all these different institutions, families, schools, communities. They all have building blocks for positive youth development. Okay, things that we can use to build on young people's strengths. Okay, so aligning or creating a good fit between youth strengths and the ecological assets or assets that are out there in the community will promote positive youth development. Okay, so for example, you have a young person who's they have a very strong interest in bola. They suka main bola. Okay, now if you live in a community where there's a bola club right down the street, that is what we refer to as promoting PYD or having alignment, right? You have the young person's strengths, which is an interest and maybe certain skill level in playing bola, playing football. And we have a program, a bola program or a bola club team right down the road. So he can go into that club team and he can develop his strengths, okay? Or you have a young woman who's very good at drawing, okay, art, seni, yeah? And in the community, we have several arts programs. Okay, so after school, she can go there, she can learn how to refine her skill, develop her interest in art, and so forth. Okay, that's what we call alignment. And this is what promotes PYD. Okay. So the idea is to match, right? To find that alignment between young people's strengths and the assets in the community, neighborhood, school, wherever, that's going to promote their development. Okay. So my son is now interested in Silat, yeah, Silat, martial arts, yeah. And just so happens that I also used to do Silat. Okay, so I have my Silat teacher. So now I've got him into that Silat class. Okay, so he's developing his strengths, his own assets. All right. And so that's where positive youth development becomes very powerful in helping young people. So whatever their needs are, right? So they have a need for belonging. There's an asset out there, whether it's a youth association, it's a group of friends. There's an outlet for them to develop that strength and that need for belonging. All right. And so this is how we think about PYD, alignment between young people's individual strengths and their interests and their needs and the assets out there that can help them to develop them. All right. And so that's essentially what PYD is all about. Any questions? Soalan ada? No questions? Okay, clear. Senyap. Okay, nothing. Okay, so now this is what we call, well, I'm not really sure this has a name, but it is an example of all the potential assets in the young people, in youth's environment, right? In youth's environment. Okay, so any given young person, if you look at what we call the ecology, right? Their environment, the social environment, really. Okay, we have schools. You see at the top here, yeah? Schools. There's different types of social services. There's businesses, government, police, parks and recreation. We have neighborhood association, media. In Malaysia, we don't have sheriff's department, but that's like police also. We have youth groups, Persatuan Belia. PTA is like PIBG, yeah? PIBG, PTA. Okay, Agama, religious groups, Agama, and also we have religious places like masjid, temples, and so forth. All right, older citizens, orang tua, orang mas, senior citizen, libraries. Okay, in Western countries, there's a lot of libraries around. Libraries are really important institutions in Western countries. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, we don't have so many libraries, but they're a great place for young people to go and just hang out. And of course, you can do a lot of things in libraries, like use internet and read and all that. Civic organizations, okay, Persatuan, there are different types of NGOs and so forth. Okay, and then you have young Majlis Daerah, okay, school board, town, local boards, and of course parents and families. So all of these different institutions can be assets for youth development. They can provide some sort of outlet for young people to develop their strengths and their interests. All right. So for example, we know obviously things like families and schools, they're quite obvious, right? How they play that role. But even like businesses, for example, many businesses offer what? They offer things like apprenticeship, yeah, or part-time jobs, right? So young people involved in those things, they can develop their skills. They can develop their entrepreneurial skills. They can develop their skills about doing business and so forth. Okay, so businesses can be important for youth development, for PYD, right? Obviously, like things like parks and recreation, the youth association, those are pretty obvious as well. Media, okay, the media can be a place for young people to develop their social skills or to develop their knowledge about what's going on in the world through the media. Okay, so they can acquire knowledge and information from the media. They can also be involved in media through like social media, for example. And so all of these things, if we look at these as potential PYD contributors, things that contribute to PYD, okay, we can see that there's a lot of opportunities for young people to develop their strengths. Okay, so this is an important way of looking at all the different possibilities in young people's lives. All right, so I have to sort of move this out of the way. Okay, so in this slide, in the old days, well, not in the old days actually, in the old thinking, okay, the older thinking, the traditional approach to working with youth looks at these things as I mentioned already: prevention, intervention, and crisis. So we wait for problems to happen, right, before we intervene in the lives of young people. Okay, the traditional approach. The PYD approach doesn't wait for problems to happen. Okay, we involve young people in positive types of activities before problems occur. Okay, so focused on preparation. Okay, preparing young people by giving them skills, giving them opportunities to develop their competencies, okay, and so forth. Participation, all right, by involving them in all these different types of activities and organizations. And then shared leadership, giving them opportunities to lead, which is a very important part of developing themselves through PYD. Okay, so those of you who have taken on leadership positions, you know how difficult they are, right? It's not easy to be a leader, but in that process, you learn a tremendous amount and you develop many, many different skills. What are some of the skills that you develop as leaders? So those of you, for example, who are in Pasuma or leaders in Pasuma, what are some of the skills that you develop as leaders?
Problem solving.
Problem solving, yeah, that's a very, very important skill to develop, especially nowadays, because it seems like there's all kinds of problems going on everywhere. Yeah, problem solving, exactly. What else?
Be a discerning listener.
Sorry, what is it?
Be a listener, a good listener.
Hanim, yeah, being a good
To
listener.
solve
Yeah, listening skills, very important skill. What else?
Communication.
Yes, Amir, thank you. Communication. What other skills? Reflect a little bit on your own experiences. What other skills are you developing as leaders? There's so many.
situational awareness.
Sorry, Hanim, I didn't hear you.
Situational awareness.
Situational awareness. Wow, okay. Yeah. All right, that's a good one. Lagi. Apa lagi?
Decision making.
Yep, decision making, big one as well, very important one.
Time management.
Time management, thank you. Farah, very good. Yeah, time management. What else? How about what's another kind of management? In addition to time management, what other kind of management skills do you develop as
Have
leaders?
to be flexible.
Absolutely. You learn to be flexible, another important skill. How about managing people? That's probably the hardest skill to learn.
Creativity.
Okay, how to do activities, how to put on activities or to, yeah, very good. These are all, if you look at, and we're going to discuss this next week, inshallah, when we talk about youth development and IR 4.0. But these are all the skills that they're talking about now that young people need to be successful in the new economy, for example, the digital economy, IR 4.0, right? This is what employers are looking for. If you look at the list of skills and competencies, it's all the things you guys just mentioned. Literally, it's not all this highly technical skills. I mean, for certain jobs, yeah, you need a certain level of technical skill. But most employers, they want to see the very same things that you guys just told me. All those the important leadership type of skills. Okay, so that's why these types of positive youth development programs are so important. That's why getting involved in leadership is so important. Okay, so here it says shared leadership. Why do you think it says shared leadership? Who's the leadership shared with? Any idea? In the context of youth development, who would be sharing this leadership?
With the peers.
Okay, yeah, of course there is a lot of shared leadership with peers, but actually in this case it's talking about shared leadership with adults. Okay, and the reason it's talking about shared leadership with adults is that because it's in the context of youth, right? So young people, maybe they've never led before, right? And so what it's saying that in the context of shared leadership, that's when young people can be leaders alongside with adults and they can lead together. That's where they learn most effectively because they can actually they can learn from adults' experiences, right? And it's sort of like a mentoring kind of approach, right? So this sort of mentoring approach to leadership is very effective as a way of acquiring those skills. So if you've never led before, how do you know how to problem solve? Of course, we can use a constructivist learning approach that we learned early in the class, right? And we can just let young people just go and do it and let them make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. Yes, that is one way. But collaborative learning in this case, shared leadership that involves collaborative learning, where they learn together with the adults. They do it together. They problem solve together. They plan the activities together. They do the activities together. They manage the program together. That's where the most effective type of skill transfer of skills and knowledge happens, actually. So in the context of youth development, and especially like youth programs and that sort of thing, shared leadership is actually the more effective way. Okay, more effective way. Not always, but usually. All right, so that's why it mentions here shared leadership as an approach for PYD. Okay, so we have the traditional youth services. The focus is on problems. Okay, so addressing young people's problems, being reactive or reacting to, waiting for problems to happen and then doing something. Right, so we just let young people be as they are, and then once they screw up, then we come in and we try to give them some kind of program. So you see, like, stop smoke, program to get young people to stop smoking. Well, the problem is that they're already smoking. So if we had properly maybe educated them initially about the dangers of smoking, right, perhaps they would have not started to begin with. Okay, so that, and then like targeted youth. Okay, so traditional youth services focuses on specific groups, and usually groups that are involved in these kind of problem behaviors, right? So it's very targeted. It's not for all youth. Okay, as you see on the other side, PYD is for all youth, right? So whatever their interests are, whatever their strengths are, we try to get them involved in these kind of programs, regardless of who they are, rich, poor, Malay, Chinese, Indian, Matsale, doesn't matter. It's for everybody. Okay, youth as recipients. Okay, so traditionally youth as recipients. In PYD programs, it's youth as active participants, right? So we just talked about shared leadership, right? We want young people to be leading. We want them to be involved in leadership, not just as show up for the program, you get your hat, you get your shirt, and then you go home. That's the traditional way of doing youth programs. Nowadays, it's young people in leadership roles. Okay, so we want young people to be the instigators of these things. Okay, traditionally it was a more of a program approach where we just do isolated programs. PYD is more of a community response. It's more of looking at systemic ways to involve young people in these things, right? So better if it's done in the context of a community of some kind, whether it's a neighborhood, like a geographic community, it can be a school community, you know, a community NGO or something, but it's ongoing and it's community based. Okay, so it's not just these one-off, you know, these one-off programs that usually don't really result in anything because they're just one-off program here there. Okay, so that's the traditional way. And traditionally, these programs were provided by professional providers or professionals, like, you know, people like me work at universities. We go in, we do a one-off program, and that's it. PYD tries to get community members involved again to make it lasting, to make it something that's permanent. Okay, so it's ongoing, it's regular, it's done by the members of the community themselves. So we develop relationships in the process, develop networks in the process, build social capital and all that. Okay, so that makes it more effective and more permanent, more lasting. Yeah. All right, so you can see the traditional way of doing things, problem focused, the PYD way of focus on positive outcomes, and some of their core differences. Yeah, they're quite different in how they go about doing things. Okay, so let's do this last slide and we'll take a break. Yeah. All right, so when we look at this pyramid, what do youth need to thrive? Okay, this is sort of similar to, I don't know if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not the same, but it's a sort of a little bit related. You know, for young people to thrive, in other words, for them to remember, be prepared and be engaged, okay, and be really ready to be successful in their adult lives. Okay, we have to first, of course, at the very bottom, we have to make sure that we address safety and basic needs. Okay, that first and foremost for all youth. Okay, and that's why if you look at like what's happened during the pandemic, COVID-19, it's sort of thrown this whole thing out of whack because COVID-19 has forced us to go back to the foundation of the pyramid, right? Because a lot of young people have lost that security of the safety and basic needs, right? Because of COVID-19. So we need to sort of step back and make sure that young people have their basic needs met first. That's always the case. You know, safety and basic needs must come first in anything that has to be there. You can't do anything else without that, right? You know, even in the context of our religion, or at least the Muslim religion, Islam, there's a tradition where our Prophet ﷺ said that before you go and teach people how to pray, teach them to grow crops. Okay, there is a hadith, there's a tradition, hadith about that. Okay, so before you can ask people to worry about things like spirituality, you know, they have to have their very basic needs met. You know, they can't pray if their stomachs are always empty, if they're starving, right? So basic survival must come first. Okay, and that's sort of a universal kind of idea. And then preparedness. Okay, so basic preparedness. Okay, so providing them with the skills, right? Skills and competencies. And then engagement. From there, then they begin to get engaged in society in different ways, right? So that may be through NGO work, that may be through volunteer work, that may be just engagement in, you know, having a job, right? It's also a form of engagement. And that leads to what we call a sense of connectedness. They feel a sense of connectedness to society, right? They feel like they belong, that they have something to give, that they have some ties and some sense of belonging to the society, okay? And so that leads to connectedness, all right? And that's ultimately what we want. We want young people to be competent, to be skilled, to be engaged, and to feel connected, like they are part of society, okay? And so that is what leads to thriving, all right? And then they really can thrive. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions so far?
Not yet.
No? Okay. Well, I hope that means that everything's clear. All right. So why don't we take a 7-minute break? Okay, take a 7-minute break. Is it okay? Boleh.
Yes.
Yes, boleh.
All right, so let's just take a few minutes and we'll be back. Come back in a bit. Okay, I'm gonna get started again. You guys there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So moving on. Now, this is something called the 6 C's of positive youth development. Okay, 6 C's. So, um, the 6 C's is a way, if you read the Malaysian youth policy, the national youth policy, the 6 C's are the way that, one way of conceptualizing PYD into actual outcomes, right? So we say, okay, so say we have this program called PASUMA, right? It's a youth program. It's a student-based youth program. And we want to think about, well, how does PASUMA contribute to youth development? Okay, what are the sort of outcomes that we want young people to develop, right, from being involved in PASUMA? One of the ways that we can think of it or look at it is according to what's called the 6 C's, and this is one of the models of PYD that's used in practice. You know, when people do youth programs, the 6 C's is basically these six outcomes. All right, so one is competence, confidence, connection, character, and caring. Okay, and those five lead to what's called contribution. Okay, so you can see they all start with C. That's why it's called the 6 C's. And so basically, if you're involved in PASUMA, we can say, okay, so if our students are going to be involved in PASUMA, what are the outcomes that we want them to achieve? You know, what are the PYD outcomes, right? Indicators of thriving, okay? Well, we want them to be competent. Okay, well, what do we want to be competent in? What kind of competencies do we want them to have? So maybe we want them to be competent in program planning. Maybe we want them to be competent in how to do training. Maybe we want them to be competent in working in a team, you know, cooperation, teamwork, and all that. There's many different types of competencies that we can identify from the work in PASUMA, okay, that we can put as our sort of goals, program goals. Okay, so that's competence. We also want them to gain confidence, learn to be confident in their own abilities, right? So the more programs that you do, the more experience you get, right? Working with the staff, you know, the lecturers and stuff, you'll gain more confidence, right? Especially you guys leaders, as leaders, you know, Hanim and all you guys, the more you do this kind of work, the more confident you're going to get, right? In your own abilities, right? And so that's important. Young people have that confidence. And the only way you get confidence is by doing things and learning from your mistakes, succeeding, right? And getting better, right? Once you start to get better at things, then you feel more confident. Connection is another one. So we want, through PASUMA, we want students to have better connection to who? To each other, to the university, to the communities that they're working with, to HRD people outside, whether they're HRD experts or they're HRD practitioners, connection to organizations that you might be working for in the future, connection to the lecturers, right? So there's a variety of different forms of connection that being in PASUMA will allow you to have, right? And then character. We want our students who are in PASUMA to increase and improve on building up their character. Okay, so being honest, having integrity, being trustworthy, being reliable, right? All those qualities that employers want their employees to have, good character, right? And this is, of course, is the foundation of our religion as well, right? We want to develop young people's character. Okay, so one of the outcomes of one of the 6C outcomes is good character. We want young people to develop their character. And then, of course, we also want them to have a caring attitude. We want them to care about society, to care about other people, right? To care about those less fortunate, etc. So this is the sort of affective domain, right? The heart, dealing with the heart, right? And we want our young people who are involved in PASUMA to have that caring mentality, to help others, right? Through training and through professional development, we can help others to be more effective in their jobs and so forth. So that's a form of caring, right? We care about other people. Combined, all these 5 combined lead to what is called contribution, where we want young people to make a contribution, a positive contribution to their organizations, to their communities, to society. All right. And so if you have these 5, then of course that will lead to contribution. Okay, so this is the 6 C's model of PYD. Okay, so you'll see this in a lot of you see it all over the internet. You see it in a lot of readings, writings on positive youth development. Okay, it's even one of the foundational models in our Malaysian National Youth Policy, the 6 C's. So when you guys go for your PSUMA programs, you can think about this as well. You know, for example, you're going to do a job skills training program or something. Think about these 6 C's. What are the 6 C's from these 6 C's? What are the C's that you want to develop? Okay, and then you can plan the program according to this model. Okay, so we want them to have confidence. How are we going to build up their confidence? What kind of activities are we going to do to build up their confidence? All right, and so then you'll be fulfilling this kind of approach. Okay, the 6 C's model. So PYD fosters the 6 C's as characteristics needed by all young people to transition into adult life. So these 6 C's are seen as sort of universal needs for young people to thrive as adults. Okay, and so I've just mentioned some of these. Okay, I'm just gonna give you some more examples here. So competence, we have civic and social engagement, cultural engagement, physical health, emotional health, intellectual achievement, employability. All of those are different forms of competence. Okay, so there's different competencies that go along with those. Okay, so these are all the different ways that we can develop young people's competence, right? Caring and compassion, okay, also means empathy and concern for others, right? As I just mentioned. Confidence, having a sense of mastery, self-efficacy, okay? This yakin, this sense that you can, whatever you put your mind to, you can do it, okay? That's confidence, right? Character, okay? So having a sense of responsibility and autonomy, right? So autonomy means that you can work on your own. A sense of spirituality, self-awareness, awareness of one's own personality or individuality, okay? And having a strong sense of character also means being, as I mentioned, someone that's trustworthy, right? Someone that's reliable, okay? Those are also important characteristics of character. Connection. You're a member, you have a sense of belonging, right? And you feel safe and you feel like you're involved in structured activities, okay? This is also related to connection. And then lastly, contribution, being involved as an active participant and decision maker in services, organizations, and community. Okay, so giving back, I mean, that's one of the beauties of things like PSUMA, of these types of organizations and groups, is that it gives you an opportunity, gives you a vehicle, right, to give back and to contribute, okay? And of course, as a good citizen, we should all be making some contributions to our different organizations and communities. Okay, so one of the community assets for the promotion of PYD is effective youth serving programs, okay? Okay, so the big 3, these are called the big 3 features of effective programs. So we talked about, we talked about programs, right? Youth programs, PSUMA, etc. But what's an effective program? Okay, what does it look like if the program is effective? Well, effective programs have positive, sustained adult-youth relationships, okay? So, for example, in PSUMA, you guys are the youth, of course. In PSUMA, which adults do you relate with? Which adults do you work with in PSUMA?
The advisor.
Mostly your advisor, right? So that's the adult that's the adult leader for the program, okay? So ideally, you should have this sort of positive working relationship with the adult leader or the advisor, okay? And in different programs, different programs work differently. So there may be other adults involved as well, right? But those sustained relationships are really important because this is where the sort of mentoring takes place, right? The mentoring takes place. Effective youth programs also have some sort of skill building activities. Again, they're educational, right? Not like this, like classroom education. It's more of hands-on, practical, experiential education. but there is some sort of skill building that goes on. So you're learning some kind of skills. And then we just mentioned many, right, just now, when I was talking about Basuma, and I asked you what kind of skills, and you guys mentioned several skills. Okay, and so this is the beauty of effective youth development programs, is that there is a lot of skill building that goes on. And if you notice, these are not the same skills that you learn in school, right? Or even in university classes like this. These classes are mostly for knowledge acquisition, right? But Basuma is more about doing, it's more about applying, it's more about experiential learning, right? So there's totally different skills that you're gaining from that kind of a program. And the third big feature, major feature of effective programs is youth participation and leadership in every facet of the program. Okay, so from A to Z, it's your guys' program. You guys lead it. You know, you are doing. You know, you're running the show, as we say. Okay, with the help of the adult advisor, of course, right? But it's really about shared leadership, and this is where all those skills get practiced and get refined. Okay, so these are three of the main features of effective youth programs. So if you have any youth program, at the very least, these three elements should be there. Okay, and of course there are other features of effective programs. In fact, depending on which literature you refer to, there can be up to 8 or even 10 of these elements. Okay, but these are 3 of the most important. Okay, this is like what we talk about when we talk about quality programs. Okay, so youth development assets is another way of thinking about PYD. So we just talked about the 6 C's, right? The 6 C's is one way of thinking about and practicing PYD. Another model of practicing PYD, thinking about or conceptualizing PYD, is called the youth development assets approach or model. Okay, and so this is based on what we call internal assets and external assets. Okay, now the external assets are all those things that are out there in our environment, in our communities, our schools, outside of ourselves, that help young people to build up their strengths, okay, to build on their strengths, okay, to help them develop. Okay, so as you can see here, there's 4 main categories of each of these assets. So externally, we have support, empowerment, boundaries and expectations, and constructive use of time. All right, I'm going to get into these more specifically in a minute. The internal assets are the young person's own assets that they have within themselves. Okay, so for example, a commitment to learning is an asset, right, for their development, right? Because when you're committed to learn, that is where you acquire knowledge and you grow, etc. Positive values. Okay, if you have positive values, that's also an internal asset. If you have social competencies, that's also an asset that helps you develop, as well as a positive identity. Okay, so let's look at these a bit more closely. These are the main groups of assets, and within each of these, there are specific assets. And the total is 40. Okay, so according to the original list that was developed by what's called the Search Institute, you see at the bottom there, there's an initial list of 40 assets. All right. And so what they found when they do research on these assets is that the more assets a young person has in their life, the less involved they are in negative outcomes. Okay, so here's an example. Young people who have more assets. Okay, so we look at this first column here, this column here on the left. Young people who have, the more assets they have, the less involved they are in negative outcomes. So when they have more assets, they're less likely to use things like alcohol, drugs, and they're less likely to be involved in violence. All right, the more assets they have. The less assets they have, you can see, the more likely they are to be involved in these kind of negative behaviors. Okay, so this is the importance of having these assets, all right, for young people to have these different assets. Likewise, with thriving indicators or positive outcomes, positive indicators in young people's lives. Okay, so here we have 2 examples. Succeeds in school and maintains good health. Okay, so these are the 2 outcomes. These are the 2 thriving indicators. So again, the more assets that young people have, the more likely they are to succeed in school and be healthy. All right. And so that's why the PYD assets is such an important model. And this is also mentioned in our Malaysian National Youth Policy, all right? This PYD approach. Okay. All right, I'm gonna skip that one. So PYD is about empowering young people to successfully navigate the waters of life. Okay, that's really what what PYD is all about. It's about empowering young people. Once we empower young people with those 6 C's, with those 40 assets, young people are more capable, right? More confident, more capable, and more likely to be successful in navigating their lives, okay, and in thriving essentially. All right, and that's essentially what it's about. Okay, so here's a cartoon. So you see the guy here's drowning, right? He can't swim. And the lifeguard says, we're encouraging people to become involved in their own rescue. All right. So PYD is not quite like this, but it's like we want people to be independent and successful, but we don't want to prepare them. We don't want to empower them to do so. Right. So this guy, he's not empowered in the fact that he doesn't know how to swim. So he can't save himself. Right? But if we empower our young people, teaching them how to swim, they can navigate the waters of life. All right, and that's kind of the idea behind the cartoon. All right, now, any questions? I know I went a little bit fast in those last few slides, but do you have any questions? Anything at all? One question. Can we have one question from somebody? Just so I know that you guys are there. It couldn't have been all that clear. I'm sure you guys have some questions. Nothing, huh? Wow. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to open up the handout that I mentioned and that I put on Putra Blast. So let me share this with you. Okay, so this is what the assets look like. All right, so I just wanted to share this with you. So this is the original list of 40 developmental assets that was originally developed by this institute called the Search Institute, and that's a youth development research institute. So as I mentioned before, there's 2 sets. There's the external assets on the left. Okay, you see this top part is external assets, and there's a total of 20, right? And they're broken down into these 4 categories like I showed you before. So support, empowerment, boundaries and expectations, and constructive use of time. Okay, so within each of these, there are specific assets. So in terms of support, you can see here, there's family support, positive family communication, other adult relationships, caring neighborhood, caring school climate, parental involvement in schooling. Okay, these are all the different types of support that if these are present or existing in the life of a young person, there's a better chance that they will be healthy later on. Okay, physically and socially, psychosocially healthy. All right. As you can see here, all right, these developmental assets help young people to grow up to be healthy, caring, and responsible. All right. So that's the different types of support. It's family support. It's a support from other adults. So that could be teachers, that can be ustaz, ustaza, that can be neighbors. All right. Having caring and being involved or growing up in a caring neighborhood. Okay. And a caring school climate. Right. So school and family mostly, and neighborhood. And then empowerment. So the assets for empowerment are community values youth as resources, right? Service to others, and then safety. Okay, so these are the indicators or assets for empowerment. So when young people are empowered in these ways, they're more likely to be healthy and thriving. Boundaries and expectations. Okay, so it's not just about all this stuff, it's also about having healthy boundaries, limits, right? So family boundaries, having clear rules and consequences. Okay, school boundaries, neighborhood boundaries, having adult role models, okay, positive peer influence, and high expectations. Okay. And then constructive use of time. Okay, so creative activities, youth programs, religious community, as well as time at home. All right. So these are constructive ways for young people to use their time. So when these are present, more likely that young people will be healthy. Okay, so those are the external, the 20 external assets. These are the assets that are external to the young person. Now the internal assets here are the other 20, right? So we have commitment to learning. Okay, so achievement, motivation, school engagement, homework, bonding to school, reading for pleasure, etc. Positive values, caring, equality and social justice, integrity, honesty, responsibility, and restraint. Okay. Social competencies, planning and decision making, interpersonal communication, cultural competence, resistance skills, and peaceful conflict resolution. Right. And then lastly, positive identity. Okay. So personal power, self-esteem, sense of purpose, and positive view of the future. All right. So these are all the internal assets. All right. So there's 40 in total. Okay. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go download this for yourself, open it up and read through it. And what I want you to do is I want you to think back to when you were, say, let's just say a secondary school student. Okay. So maybe you're in Form 5, Form 4, Form 5, around that time of your life. I want you to tick, all right, or mark each of these assets that you felt that you had at that time. Okay. So for example, if you grew up in a very supportive family, you would just tick this one, family support. Okay. See, these assets, either you more or less have them or you don't. Okay. So I want you to go through these 40 assets and indicate which ones you felt you had at that time in your life. And I want you to count them up total. So out of the total of 40 assets, how many of these assets did you have growing up? And that's what I want you to sort of figure out. Okay. I've done this myself many times, and it's kind of fun. All right. So can we do that now? We only got about 15 minutes. It shouldn't take too long. Boleh?
Boleh.
Okay.
Yay.
All right. So go ahead and open it up, and then you can just sort of on your own keep track, and also keep track as I ask on Puja Blast. Sorry. Let me get back to Puja Blast. Internet is a bit slow, sorry. Oh, I've logged out. Okay. All right. So as you can see in Puja Blast, I've asked, I want you to score your assets. So out of the 40, how many did you feel you had growing up? And then I want you to indicate also which scores were higher, the external or the internal assets. So there's 20 of each, right? So just keep track of which ones were higher. And then which asset categories were you high in and low in? All right. So of those categories, there's 4 categories in each, right? So which ones were you high and low in? There's one category that youth in Malaysia, from the research that we've done on this, is always lower than the rest. And I just want to see if it's true with you as well. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Download it, and then you can start asking these or answering these questions. Okay, and what I'd like you to do is, if you could just put your answers in the chat box. Okay, in the chat box on Zoom, just indicate, for example, like I had 32 out of 40 assets, just like that. Okay, and then higher on internal. Then the highest category was empowerment. Lowest was, support or something like that. Okay, so just kind of report it like that, and we can just sort of take a look at everyone's answers. All right, boleh.
Boleh.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Okay, how we doing? I don't see any answers yet. Boleh buat?
Can.
All right, I see Hanim. Thank you, Hanim. 28 out of 40. Higher on internal, highest social competence, lowest constructive use of time. Okay, interesting, interesting. Hazik, also 28. Yeah, that's sort of around what most students tend to be in that neighborhood, between 25, 30, around there. Higher on internal, yep, most people are higher on internal in Malaysia. Highest support external and positive values. Lowest social. Okay, good. So this also, I mean, I think this is also a good self-assessment. Yeah, it tells us a little bit about ourselves as well, I think. Nadira, okay, Nadira, thank you. 22 to 40, higher on external, interesting. Highest support, lowest positive values. Okay, interesting. Okay, others? We have just a few more minutes. I'm going to let you go because I want to give you some time before your next class. Anyone else want to share your results? Just to remind everyone, it's really important that, class participation is also a consideration in your final grade. Okay, so keep that in mind, all right, when you're doing these in-class activities, when there's discussion about the lectures, okay? Remember about class participation, okay? Don't forget that. Lynn, 24 out of 40, higher on internal, okay? Highest commitment to learning. Oh, interesting. Lowest positive values. Norhana, 3040, higher on internal also. Okay, lowest constructive use of time again. G1, 30 out of 40, higher on internal, highest social competence, lowest constructive use. Okay, so several of you have put lowest as constructive use of time. That's very interesting. Amir, 30 out of 40 also, higher internal. Oh, equal internal, external. Lowest empowerment. Okay, Hazika also lowest empowerment. Yeah, our research, we actually did 2 studies on the assets in Malaysia with a large sample in each study. We found that empowerment was by far the lowest category of asset in Malaysia, empowerment, okay? So it's not surprising that many of you put empowerment as your lowest indicator. Well, I see several constructive uses of time, and I see a couple of positive identities also as low. Okay, most of you put higher on internal. That's quite normal. We also found that the external assets are low, tend to be lower in Malaysia among youth. Okay, again, constructive use of time and empowerment. Hairul also. Yeah, so you can see also, yeah, Farah also, same thing. Yeah, you can definitely see that pattern there. Okay. Afika. All right, lowest again, empowerment. Yeah. So these are important things to think about, especially, when you guys are doing programs for PASUMA. Think about the importance of empowering each other, empowering your fellow classmates, empowering other youth, right? It's really important that we focus on this issue of empowerment. Okay. Shijen, also constructive use of time is the lowest. All right. Ashraf, also empowerment lowest. Great. Okay, well, we're out of time, unfortunately, but thank you all for those who did it. Appreciate your participation, and I hope that you're able to get a sense of what PYD is about today. All right, but we will continue this discussion throughout the rest of the semester. Much of it will be based on a PYD sort of approach to youth development. Okay. I can see some answers still coming in here. Yeah, so definitely a strong pattern there. Constructive use of time and empowerment as the lowest. Internal being the highest. Support is quite high, I notice, and that's quite normal as well. We found that also in our studies. Okay. All right. So that's all for today, guys. Inshallah, we'll see you all tomorrow around 12. Okay. Have a good day and see you tomorrow.
Thank
Okay,
you,
Prof.
Prof.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Jumpa lagi.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prof.
Prof.
Sama. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you,
Waalaikumsalam.
Prof.
Salam, Prof.